Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier today, we voted on memorializing the tragic events that took place 40 years and one day ago at Kent State University. Americans today, most Americans, are too young to remember what happened then, but I think that those of us who lived through that time and many others who thought about it or saw afterward what happened have this picture in their mind. This is Marianne Vecchio kneeling over the body of Jeffrey Miller at Kent State that terrible day when 4 students were shot by American soldiers. I think we would honor them by remembering how and why they died, and that's what I propose to do now. In 1968, Richard Nixon ran for president. He said he had a secret plan to end the war. That plan was so secret that apparently even Nixon himself didn't know what it was, because when he was elected, he simply expanded the war. In November of 1969, the My Lai massacre exposed to the whole world, not just to Americans, but to the whole world, the sheer brutality of the war in Vietnam. The following month, in December of 1969, the draft was instituted. American college students and others, everyone of a certain age, everyone knew that they would have to serve in Vietnam unless the war was ended. And then on April 30th of 1970, the first war ever announced on TV, President Nixon announced the invasion of Cambodia by U.S. forces. Almost immediately, there were protests at universities all around the country, including at Kent State. And those protests grew and grew day by day. And the right wing immediately mobilized against these protests. In Ohio, the Governor Rhodes, said, quote, "They're the worst type of people that we harbor in America." These students protesting against the war. I think that we're up against the strongest, well-trained, militant revolutionary group that's ever been assembled in America. And President Nixon chimed in by saying that the anti-war protesters were pawns of foreign communists. And so it was that 4 days after the announcement of the invasion of Cambodia, there was a protest that took place at Kent State University in Ohio. 20,000 students collected, assembled peaceably to protest, and the National Guard was called in to drive them away. First, the National Guard attacked them with tear gas. The students took the tear gas canisters and threw them back at the National Guard. The National Guard drew its bayonets and charged the students and forced them to a different location, but they still didn't disperse. So at that point, they shot them. 4 Americans died that day, including Jeffrey Miller. The protests continued. In fact, they grew. Almost 1,000 universities were shut down all across the country. For the only time in American history, we had a national student strike everywhere in the country. At Jackson State, 10 days later, 2 more students were shot by the National Guard, shot dead. And the thing that I remember most from that time is this sign. Written on a bed sheet and dropped from a dormitory window outside of New York University in New York. This noble sign: "They can't kill us all." Let's take a closer look. They can't kill us all. Now then, as now, together, both times,